There's maybe no dish I care for more in all of Indian cuisine than a good dosa. The super thin, fermented Wonder crepe of South Indian street food fame is really a perfect food. I discovered these early on when I learned I couldn't eat gluten anymore, and I've been transfixed ever since. Technically speaking, for a long time I made dosas kind of poorly. That didn't mean they weren't delicious. I ate them batches at a time on a regular basis. It just meant that I was inadvertently making something closer to uthapam, a different dish cooked with the same batter that's a bit thicker and more closely resembles a pancake than a crepe. I'm gonna get to those in another video. There's some technique in play here that makes all the difference in the world in getting that perfect, super thin, crispy dosa. Let's start with where all dosas begin, the batter. Raise your hand if you've ever fermented before. Drop me a line in the comments if you've tried it. Unlike fermenting something like sauerkraut, you cook dosa batter before eating it. So while you're not getting a dose of probiotics like you would be with fermented cabbage, you're still getting a complex flavor with its nutritional content bumped up. Think sourdough. For the batter, I grabbed a big jar and added 2 cups of basmati, 1 cup of white urad dal lentils, a 1/4 cup of chana dal lentils, 1 tablespoon of fenugreek seeds, 1 initial tablespoon of salt, and finally 5 cups of filtered water. I stored this in a warm place for 24 hours. You can go for 12 hours for a lightly fermented dosa or 36 if you're looking for an extra sour batter. 24 is the sweet spot for me. Once fermented, I blended it until smooth. The consistency should be about that of a pancake batter. And now, while you need salt for the fermentation itself, it also slows the process down a little bit. So what I like to do is stir in 1 more tablespoon of salt once it's ready so the batter is well seasoned. Then I just refrigerate this until I'm ready to use it. It stores almost indefinitely. Also, if you keep it out on the counter, it's gonna ferment a little bit more, so just keep that in mind. So what's the right way to cook this batter? Well, we're gonna get to that, but first, filling. It's funny. When it was time for me to prep the broccoli for this video, I absolutely thought I had more in the fridge than I actually did. What I did have in abundance, though, were broccoli stems. Most recipes only call for florets, so I'll often just throw the stems into a bag in the fridge to use another time when I'm in a pinch. Well, this just happened to be one of those times. First, I separated the whole broccoli head into florets and stems, putting the florets into another bowl off to the side. To make the stems edible, it's really just about getting rid of that tough outer layer. If you slice the stem in half, you can see clearly the tender inside versus the tough outer skin. I just like to take a manageable piece from the stem and then just slice off the outer layer. From here, I slice them into sticks and then again into cubes and set them to the side. For the florets, my favorite method is to steam them and then just dress them afterwards. I pop them into a steamer basket and let them go for about 7 minutes until just tender. Once they were ready, I immediately hit them with salt and gave them a toss. Seasoning while they're still hot is key because it gives a chance for the salt to dissolve into the florets. It makes all the difference in the world between the broccoli tasting seasoned versus tasting salty. I set this to the side to finish up later. As for the stems, well, they're not quite the divas like florets. They can handle a little longer, stronger cooking. They're also great at absorbing flavors. I grabbed this amazing pungent mustard oil for the saute. Broccoli are brassica, which are also members of the mustard family, so this is a natural pairing. I added about 2 tablespoons of mustard seed oil to a pan over medium heat and then added the broccoli stems with a bit of salt. I let this saute for about 5 minutes before I added in a tablespoon each of mustard seeds and white urad dal. Then I added about 10 fresh curry leaves to the party and let that all cook for about 5 more minutes. At this point, the broccoli stems start to get a bit caramelized, the urad will start to darken noticeably, and the curry leaves get crispy. At the end, I added about a 1/2 cup of coconut flakes and let those cook with everything for another 2 minutes until they became golden. As soon as it's ready, the whole thing comes off the stove and gets folded in with those broccoli florets. This just gets finished with a squeeze of lime juice and a drizzle of raw mustard oil. I let this sit for at least 20 minutes for all the flavors to mingle. Okay, one more condiment and then it's time to make these dosas. Dosa and coconut is as traditional a pairing as it gets, but I couldn't resist working in some tomato to play with the broccoli and mustard oil. I started with 1 shallot, 1 knob of ginger, and 2 garlic cloves and gave them all a rough chop. I added these into the cup of my wet grinder along with a tablespoon of toasted chana dal. I added in just enough water to cover and blitzed it into a paste. Next, I added 2 tablespoons of coconut oil to a saucepan and got it hot before adding in the paste. I let that cook for a couple of minutes while stirring continuously and added some good chili powder for some extra heat. After 5 minutes of cooking, I added about a 1/4 cup of good crushed tomatoes and kept stirring. After about 15 minutes, I added some salt and about 3 tablespoons of coconut cream. I worked this in and finished it with some flaked coconut. I set this wildly addictive chutney off to the side and finally got ready to make these dosas. Like I said earlier, there's no such thing as a dosa that's not delicious. Getting the technique on point though, that's no simple feat. I learned a lot when trying to get these dosas right. First, don't grease the dosa pan unless you want to signal the arrival of a new pope. All this white smoke shooting off the literally smoking hot pan does not get you where you're going. The batter needs to stick to the pan and it will release naturally. I'm using a carbon steel crepe pan for this, by the way. A well-seasoned cast iron skillet should do the trick too. Second, the platonic ideal of a dosa is making a wide concentric circle of batter spread super thin. I learned I had to go fast and move confidently. The only tool involved here is a measuring cup with a flat bottom. I'm using a 1/2 cup for this size pan. Third, after going super fast spreading the batter, I had to take a beat and let the batter set on the hot pan before adding the toppings. Adding the chutney too quickly didn't give me enough time for that crispy base layer to set up, so I had a bit of a soggy bottom situation. Fourth, figure out your fold. There's no time for futzing when working over a pan this hot. I've seen a million beautifully presented dosas in my day, but getting there is definitely an exercise in practice. I never quite hit that perfect equilateral triangle that I was going for, but who doesn't like the personality of an awkward-looking isosceles? I was never very good at geometry anyway. Ultimately, I got what really mattered. A super thin, crispy dosa, stuffed with a delicious mustardy broccoli and greased with an amazing tomato coconut chutney. And while I had a pile of mistake dosas plated up right next to this one, I promise you, I ate every single one of those. So you want to do more with this batter? The next video I've got coming up has me making idli in a, let's call it an untraditional way. In the meantime, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm going to see you next time. Bye now.